I'll call the council meeting to order. Madam Clerk, I believe we're going to be shifting the public hearing items around so that the two that Councillor Asmussen, they were item 1 and 3 on the original public hearing agenda, if they could be together.
I believe there are items 2 and 3 on the regular council meeting agenda.
Perfect.
First item of business are adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, January 16th, 2012. Recommendation is that council approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Now moving into bylaws.
Councillor Asmussen.
Once again, I will excuse myself as a perceived potential conflict. Thank you.
Madam City Clerk.
Now moving into bylaws for second and third reading. Item 2 is City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4263-2011 for 1239 Burke Mountain Street. Staff recommendation is that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4263-2011.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3, bylaw number 4255-2011 for the addresses of 3467, 3471, 3473, and 3474 Victoria Drive. Staff recommendations that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4255-2011.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I'd like to just get some clarification on staff or some of the issues that were raised, specifically the issue of the cookie-cutting nature of the sketch, the diagram that we have of the proposed development, and what sort of sorry, am I missing the wrong one here? Oh, I've got them mixed up, maybe. Getting lots of. No, I'm sorry. I'll withdraw that.
The address of the item we're on?
It's 3467 to 3474 Victoria Drive.
Yeah, it's what happens when we switch the agenda order in order to accommodate somebody. Okay, this is the 4 lots in a row on Victoria. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. By all those present.
Item 4, bylaw number 4271-2011 relating to the property at 3361 Millard Avenue. The staff recommendation is that council give second, third,
I think
second. We're
going to have to bring in a different councillor.
Apologies.
And I'm going to excuse myself from this
Councillor
one.
Hodge, could you send in Councillor Asmussen?
Okay, this property is next door to my residence, so I'm going to excuse myself.
Councillor Sikora, you're right next to me, and we're always in conflict.
Well, not really, only when you are not right.
Well, if you can't have fun. We're on item 4. Madam City Clerk, go ahead.
Bylaw number 4271-2011. The recommendation is that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4271-2011.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor, oops, we'll clear him. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Pause for a moment. Are there any points of order anyone wants to bring up?
Well, there'll be one. That's, the library is going to be almost close to my place, so I'm going to excuse myself of that one.
We should. We'll let you know when you can come back.
Yeah.
Bylaw numbers 4256 and 4257, 2011, relating to the property at 2590 Austin Avenue. Staff recommendation, 1, that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Land Use Contract Discharge Bylaw number 4256, 2011, and 2, that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4257, 2011.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is withdrawn, Millard.
Item 6 was deferred. Item 7, bylaw number 4272, 2011, relating to the property at 1175 Pinetree Way. Staff recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4272, 2011.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8, bylaw number 4269, 2011, relates to bicycle parking requirements. The recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4269, 2011.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I expressed some concerns about this at first reading and at the first reading several weeks ago. And one of the, I guess my main point was that I was afraid about the addition of expense, adding to the purchase price of the residential facilities that would be impacted by this, which is any multifamily residential development. I was concerned that after going through a campaign of talking about affordable houses and affordable housing, and that yet another thing is added on to force developers to provide something that perhaps people don't want and don't want to pay for. And since then, I've been heard from some people in the development community who say it's actually not going to be that expensive. That's the actual cost of the stands to lock the bikes to, or things like that. However, I haven't heard about the actual installation of those and maintenance and things like that. And also, what I've heard is that they are speaking about their hard costs to begin with, and of course those can just be, it's not going to be onerous for them, but it's just another little thing that gets passed on to the consumer. Yeah, I don't know at what stage we find the straw that breaks the camel's back. This might not be it. It might be it. I've also talked to people since this first came up for debate about whether or not these sorts of bicycle storage facilities are actually used in residential facilities. And I've talked to many people, and they say, well, actually, you know, people with $1,000 bike or $2,000 bike, they don't trust these things to leave them out in the open. Even if it's in a locked garage, it's still exposed to other people in the building. So they're bringing them up to their apartments regardless. And so I'm not, my concerns haven't been satisfied on that front. I'm also concerned about the fact that every time we see a problem like this, that we're tempted to pass legislation, pass a bylaw to solve the problem rather than letting itself work out through market forces. This is an overly prescriptive approach. I still believe that. At the time, in first reading, I used an example of, well, you know, we believe in sustainability in the community, but we don't force every developer to put a green roof on their building, or yeah, well, I'm afraid I'm going to give some people ideas. And we also don't force them. We believe in trying to encourage bicycle usage and walking and transit usage, and those are good goals. And insofar as we can facilitate the development of infrastructure to support that cause, I'm in favor of that. But when we're telling people what they should build and what they shouldn't build inside of their residential buildings, I have a problem. I would say that it's only a very small step, and here again, Councillor Robinson, maybe you're going to take this as an idea or an encouragement. After we do this, then we're going to say, well, actually, every new apartment building should come with a bicycle, and we have to provide the bicycle as well. So, where do we stop here? Okay? So I think we stop now before we get to this. I'm just not convinced that this is actually really needed. I think it's an emblematic and overly prescriptive approach. I believe it does add some cost, and it could be just the straw, but it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. So I can continue to oppose this.
Thank you. And as soon as you started to speak, I decided I had a couple of comments of my own, and you are a lightning rod. Councillor O'Neill, there's several other councillors who have added themselves on the list. We actually, right now, we prescribe that every unit must have parking for their cars. We don't say that they should have parking for a somewhat more sustainable form of transportation, bicycles. I have an expensive bicycle. I'm not sure I would use the parking for the bicycle that's down in the underground parking. I may well take it up, but I'm sure my kids would use it, because I'm not sure that their $150 bikes are of the same concern, and they could well be locked in the basements in the underground parking storage area. I don't think this is a significant cost. I think it provides a number of benefits. It allows, particularly as we find some of our multicultural community is much more apt to raising families in high-rise buildings and multifamily buildings, whereas that wasn't necessarily the case 20 years ago. Although it certainly was among some families. I think allowing them a space in every multifamily building for those bicycles will remove that one deterrent, that deterrent right now that makes it so that in a single-family home we can have bikes for the whole family. In a multifamily building, there's simply no room in the apartment for bikes for the whole family, and therefore the family doesn't bike. And I think that if we're going to prescribe any kind of parking, it might be best to prescribe the bicycle parking and forgive the other one. The car parking in a structured parking lot is about $40,000, $45,000 per space, and yet we prescribe 1.5 of those, which is an enormous burden on affordability, perhaps $70,000 a unit. The bicycle parking may well be $700 a unit or less, or $70 a unit. I don't know. I'm not convinced that the burden on affordability is there from bike parking in the way it's there for car parking, and we don't let the market decide on car parking. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Just to respond to you, I'm so happy that staff uses UDI, and when we put this bylaw through, they obviously consulted with UDI, which, if you ever want to find out what's good and what's not good and what developers absolutely hate, that's the way to go. And we got back a very favorable letter, which I've only seen tonight for the first time, but basically they're welcoming and commending us for engaging with them, and that they think our bylaw is flexible enough to allow a variety of space-efficient parking, and the cost implications are small, and certainly a good investment that has large environmental and health benefits. I do not have a bike, not a surprise, nor will I be buying one, not another surprise. But I know a lot of the folks that are moving into some of these smaller apartments, I mean, that's what they're using for transportation. So I think it behooves us and the developers to be providing space for them. And if the developers are happy about doing it, why would I turn it down?
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Well, I certainly do support this. We're putting a lot of money into cycling infrastructure, and you need end of trip facilities in order to do something with your bike. Otherwise, believe it or not, it will get attached to things that they ought not to be attached to, like lamp posts and other structures. I don't think that Port Moody, actually, in some of their Cedarbrook apartments, put any requirements in, and you can spot which ones they are. I have a friend who lives in one of those Cedarbrook apartments, beautiful, beautiful, views and floor-to-ceiling windows, and they invested a lot of money. The developers built these beautiful apartments. But when you come in to the apartment, they've got 2 bicycle racks on either side, and they are covered in bicycles, covered in kids' bikes and adult bikes, just sort of these little commuter little things. And it is not because all the visitors there are riding their bikes. It's the owners, the people who live in this apartment building, who have no other place to store their bicycles. So what that tells me is that there is demand, although I don't know that it's market demand, but people will just park their bikes wherever, and they're currently using, I think it's the city paid for bicycle racks. So I look forward to Councillor O'Neill calling for less parking in our buildings, less car parking, because that's pretty prescriptive and very, very expensive. And I'm looking for whatever support I can get to require less car parking in our buildings, so that people will use transit and other forms of transportation. Thank you.
Look at the smirk. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. It is not a big deal as far as bicycle store parking is concerned. I don't know how expensive it is now, but it's not a big deal. But frankly, I'm going to tell you something. Every time there's something comes along, we're piling it on. Really piling it on. And, where I live in a 190-unit place, and we have a big bicycle storage space with the cars, all kinds of them. So there's a family of 4, they can have 8 bicycles in there and have enough room in there, So, what's going to be next? Should we store shopping carts there, make room for shopping carts?
Skateboards.
Is that what we're going to do next, or whatever it is? So, no, really, I'll tell you, frankly, we're just knee-jerk reaction. To everything that we do, we got a knee-jerk reaction that somehow this is such a big deal, such a good thing. I don't see many people in Coquitlam riding bicycles. Matter of fact, I think in the last week, I've seen 1 person on a bicycle, period. And so it's not a big deal. So maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now, there might be, But, I don't think that we should be imposing all these ideas. There's a lot of things that I like. Am I going to impose it on the people in this community because of my likes? I don't think so. Because it'd be pretty silly if all my likes was everybody else's likes. It just wouldn't work. That's all there's to it. So I'll tell you, although this is not a big deal, so it's not even worthwhile discussing that much. But frankly, what is next? And what's next after that? What's next after that? What's next after that? We seem to be imposing. So I think maybe we should stop and think about it a wee bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, UDI did send us a glowing letter recognizing the importance of bicycle parking for development projects. The one point I wanted to add is that it makes it easier if we set the rules in advance rather than a development application coming to us and then we going out to request that they have this bicycle parking when they weren't expecting it. So when the rules are set ahead of time, it's much easier for everybody concerned. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Obviously, I'll be voting in support of this. I think it's an excellent idea, and I don't think that we're being reactive, and we're being proactive in that. But I did want to comment that I appreciate Councillor O'Neill's understanding that we're moving towards that brave new world, and but he hasn't really caught on to the marketplace, and we are going to have to require that people provide the choice of a bicycle or a lazy boy chair. Thank you.
Now, that was a brave new world. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, when this first came up, I supported it. I think I think we're showing leadership. I think that the market, if not today, the market in the future will want this. I think we're seeing more and more people using this both as a form of transportation and as a form of recreation, and we are building for the future. Nobody says you have to bike, but for those who want, we're giving them that option. And then when the letter came from the Urban Development Institute, I was really happy to see that tonight, because it says here that the UDI recognizes the importance of bike parking for development projects. It says the bylaw is flexible enough to allow for space-efficient parking, and the cost implications are small. So to me, that's a win on both sides. And to be honest, in the couple of weeks that since it was first brought up, I haven't had one developer contact me saying that this was a bad idea. Councillor O'Neill has raised some great ideas. I like his idea of a bike with each apartment. My question would be, if it's a 2-bedroom apartment, should we have 2 bikes come with it? Thank you.
Well, most 2-bedroom apartments have at least 3 people living in them. But Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I'm going to carry the theme on here. I think this is a good idea. I think, we're trying to chip away at making cycling easier and more accessible. We have a lot of issues of people that want to cycle when they get to work. They have nowhere for their bike, nowhere to change. And we're slowly changing that. Companies are realizing the value of putting lockers in, people to change. And it's these directions that will increase cycling. Cycling has increased in the last 10 years, as Councillor Robson can probably indicate, and it will continue to increase as long as we remove the obstacles that make it a negative for people not being able to get out and cycle. And as it's been said by a couple of us here, the UDI and other see this as very minimal cost to it. A lot of the garages have odd areas that you can't put a car in that you can use for bicycle storage. It's all in the design. So I think this is a good thing, and especially for people in multifamily units where they don't have the room in their unit for a bike, that this is a good thing for them. Thank you.
Okay. And that's it. Yes. Okay. That's the last speaker. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor O'Neill is opposed. The motion carries. Councillor O'Neill is quick to point out that democracy is always right except when it's wrong.
Item 9 is a text amendment. The staff recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4270/2011.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Sikora. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I am going to support this for the time being because with respect to the lot coverage, we have nothing now, and so I see 45% as being better than nothing. But I am wondering if there is a way that we can come back to this and review it at a later date. I don't know what you would consider appropriate, 6 months or a year.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I suspect we'll probably hear some other comments from around the table about this. Not a new topic. It's come up before. There were some good points raised tonight, good discussion. Let us take it away and see how we can roll this into our 2012 work program. We're pretty busy, as you know, on the community planning side, the development side. Maybe we've got to shift our focus from streamlining to looking at sort of a sensitive policy area. So we quite welcome to take your direction. Let us take it away and we come back with a proposed work process for this.
Okay, thank you. I was referring more to the lot coverage issue than the whole thing.
Okay.
If that's of any assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I suspect we're going to hear a lot of the same sentiments around the 45%, and I was actually quite surprised to learn that we didn't have any lot coverage. So as a stopgap measure, I think Councillor Reid was talking about plugging the dam. It's like the little Dutch boy with his finger in there. I'm prepared to support this because I want to make sure that we have something in place, but I do want more information about, like, what does that look like? What are the outcomes of a 40% like we heard today that our neighbors are using versus 45%. So I'm prepared to go with 45% for tonight as part of our housekeeping, so we have some consistency. But we'll want to just get a better grasp of what that looks like. So what's the implication if we stick with 45% and some of these older, developed neighborhoods start to redevelop? Will it achieve the outcomes we're looking for? Or does it need to be something else? So I don't know if you do mock-ups or modeling or whatever we do from different neighborhoods, pretend applications with these criteria, what could they build? And that will maybe give us a flavor of whether or not it's sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, the mystery's been solved. I thought that under this housekeeping we were cleaning the whole house. Obviously not. We were just cleaning up some sidelines and some percentages for lot coverage. I was under the assumption, just so the rest of you know, that we were also dealing with things that we had spoken about before, which was boarding issues and whatever, and they were coming forward and yada yada, but we weren't. So what I want to do with the monster house situation is I will put my finger in the dike, as we said, and use the 45% now, but the process that I suggest, because I'll tell you, you try and explain this to someone, it's a nightmare. It is so complicated on how they do the massing and the heights and the roof lines and all of these things to get to a monster house, to come down to get anything. I understand how important it is. So what I would like to do within the next few months, we'll try and run around and look at some that we've approved in the last 5 or 10 years, and we can bring those photos of those forward and look at the massing that we've done on the lots and get different lot sizes, perhaps 7, 8, 10,000, whatever we've got, and then we can actually look at what the finished product is like. And it will be much easier, I think, then to point out how you measure all the massing and the walls and all that stuff if we actually have something that we can all go and look at if we want to. So that's the process that I would suggest, and I will approve this tonight, but I'd like to move forward with this in the next little while. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to vote in favor of it, and I don't share the same concern related to lot coverage. During my consulting days, sorry, I used to be a consultant, did a lot of work on accessible buildings, and for example, if a person was trying to design an accessible home, it would be one story. It would, by necessity, be one story perhaps, and it would be spread out over perhaps the entire allowable site coverage. The site coverage isn't the issue. It's only the bulk of the building, and so that if you reduce it from 45 to 40, it means that on a 8,000 square foot lot, you're only allowed to build a 7,800 square foot home, 3 stories tall, which of course is, everyone's going to say that's a monster house. And if you reduce it to 35, it's going to be slightly narrower, but just as tall. So it becomes the bulk above grade that is the issue that people complain about. All the consulting, all of the work we've ever done on monster houses was the bulk above grade, not the footprint, because you don't even know how deep the house is from the street. And that's not the stuff that changes the character of the neighborhood. It's that bulk above grade. So I don't know that we're going to focus as much on lot coverage when we do the monster house rules as we're going to focus on other elements, the actual size of that building, the size of the structure. And so it may well be that and in fact, a lot of communities that reduced their lot coverage actually ended up with more monster homes because they necessarily had to go higher because they couldn't spread out a little bit more front to back. So it's going to be a more holistic approach that we're going to look for, I hope. I think we're going to go examine all kinds of elements, and I'm not certain that where we're going to end up with, particularly as we go. We're trying right now, for example, to examine new options for single-family neighborhoods, which include a detached residential building. Is that detached residential included in the 45? And if it is, have we just imposed a disincentive to the kinds of things we're trying to encourage in the neighborhood that won't change the scale of the neighborhood, or won't change the character of the neighborhood? We may well have the unintended consequence of prohibiting the very kind of stuff that by housing choices, for example, we're trying to encourage. So I prefer to take monster houses as a holistic issue, and then this little finger in the dike, I'm fine for tonight. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll vote in favor of it, though a little reluctantly. I don't like the 45%. I think a lower number is appropriate, and I think that we do have to look at all the factors that create monster homes. And that I haven't heard any arguments for 45%. When staff were asked, what's the historic lot coverage, the answer was based on recent building permit applications. My guess is that recent permit applications probably call for a higher amount of lot coverage than those from 20 years ago, but it's only a guess on my part. But the answer was 33 to 40. So if what we're experiencing is applications for 33 to 40% lot coverage, going to 45 kind of boggles my mind. However, it gets us something on the books and something we can work from soon, I hope. Thank you.
You, Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, my original concern on this was that I thought this was a matter that required a lot more discussion and investigation and wasn't as such just a matter of cleaning up some language or bringing some bylaws and adjustments in line with each other. And Your Worship raises some very good points in terms of are we talking a lot coverage versus square footage versus footprint versus height. Then you open up the whole issue of canopy retention, because as you go wider you lose trees. So I think there's a whole lot of other things that need to be discussed here, including the possible effect on the housing choices. Staff mentioned that this is brought about by recent applications, and yet we just earlier heard from Councillor Robinson, who said in the election 3 years ago this wasn't the issue. It is today. So my thought on that is that it's probably an issue today because of those recent applications and where we've been moving with them. So I agree we got to put something in, plug that hole right away. So I'll support it as a sort of a temporary fix, but on the condition that I really want to sort of look at some of the options and how this really plays out in real development terms. Thank you.
You, Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. When you're talking about percentages, site coverages, there lies the problem. If you got a great big lot, and you start saying that should be 45% site coverage, you can have more than just a monster house on there. I lived on Porter Street for 20 years, 30 years, and my lot was 65 by 130. My house with 2 levels was about 3,500 square feet. And I had a pool in there that was 40 by 20. I had a barbecue in there. I had many other things in there, lots of room. There was no two ways about it. And the fact is that, you can't say that somehow if on a lot like that 40% would be ugly. It would not be. And yet, on some places, I guess it would be. All depends what neighborhood you're in. My house on Porter Street matched the neighborhood. Everybody had about the same type of size house as I did, So those things happen. And Councillor Reid mentions about how do you measure the heights, the sizes, the widths, everything else. And it's confusing. And it is confusing. And that's what I call red tape. And every city hall has got red tape. So how do we come over that, to where we streamline that red tape a wee bit? So, it's, I'm looking forward to with these new changes. And I know as time goes on, there'll be other changes. You can't put everything all at once and hopefully it's rosy and pink to everybody. It's perfect to everybody. Never will be. We'll be making changes to it. So, but I'm looking forward for somebody to phone me and say, Sikora, I got my building permit within a month. That's what I'm looking forward to, okay? Thank you.
Those ones never phone us. Councillor Assens.
Well, thank you very much. This issue has come and gone over the years. I think in the 90s, where I think was mentioned to us, the perimeter wall height and these issues came into being because of the concerns back then about reducing in the existing neighborhoods. So we already have those controls within our zoning bylaw to deal with some of these larger styles that came up as an issue 10, 15 years ago and have been in our bylaw ever since. And that's your perimeter wall height. The other issue coming down on a 7,000 square foot house, well, we have a lot of quarter-acre properties in Old Coquitlam and different areas where you can, at 45%, put a 7,000 and it fits the lot. So that's the reality of those larger houses, because they actually fit the lot size that's there. So I think what Mayor Stewart mentioned, there's some other issues about the height and the massing on them. The other issue, when you're comparing lot coverage sizes, 45 and Coquitlam, 40, you have to look, and I think Councilor Reid mentioned it's very complicated. You have different calculations in different cities and how you achieve at a 40 or 45. So to say, well, they're at 40 and we're at 45, that's not, it's not comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. It's different. So I don't want council to get hung up on this one comment that we should match those guys over there. Our zoning bylaws are different. I think we have better controls in our zoning bylaw in this regard to that we won't hit in some of these areas 45 because of the perimeter wall height. We'll keep it around 33 to 38%. In the comment about the Northeast, when we changed the zonings was because we had houses with detached garages, and we weren't allowed unless you took out the garage from the existing house. So when we allowed to have attached garages to housing without being penalized, we made an overall of 45%, because before at the 33, the detached garage wasn't included in that calculation. So that's why that just streamlined it. So if you built a attached garage or a detached garage, the coverage was the same. We're just, once again, streamlined. I've looked at this report by staff. I think they've done a very good job on looking at, especially putting it all in one place, just not for developers, but for, there's a lot of people that want to come and build or replace a house or whatever, single builders. This is far more simple for them. For the regular single builder, this is going to help a lot on the ease of it. So I give kudos to staff for the work and putting it all in one place, and thank you for that, and the streamlining. This is an issue that I've been on council since I've been here about making this process easier, streamlined, quicker for everybody. And I mean that everybody, from the single-family builder to the big builders, an easier process to deal with. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Okay. And I grew up in a house that was 880 square feet. One bathroom. Okay. No other speakers? Amendments before us. All in favor? Opposed? After much debate, we passed that unanimously.
Item 10 is final reading to OCP Amendment Bylaw number 4250-2011 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4251-2011 and Development Permit Authorization for 95 townhouse units in the Smiling Creek neighborhood at 3395, 3405, 3415, 3425 Highland Drive, 1425 to 1429 Coast Meridian Road, and 1430 Dayton Street. The staff recommendation is that Council 1 give fourth and final reading to Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4250-2011, give fourth and final reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4251-2011, and 3, approve signing and sealing of Development Permit 11010214DP, and the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute the permit on behalf of the City of Coquitlam.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is Park Dedication Process Bylaw number 4265-2011. We do have introductory comments by our General Manager, Parks, Recreation and Culture Services, Ms. Lori McKay.
Ms. McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is responding to direction from the Recreation, Sport and Culture Standing Committee meeting of May 30th, 2011, in which the committee directed staff to further review the process for developing a park dedication bylaw. This is following work done in 2010, further to the May 17th, 2010 Council resolution, asking staff to report back on a process for moving forward to prepare a list of candidate parks for consideration in a future parks dedication bylaw. Coquitlam currently has approximately 886 hectares, or 2,190 acres of parkland, 80% of which is protected by a variety of means. Those means include Park Dedication Bylaw, Urban Forest Dedication Bylaw, PARK, Park Dedication through the subdivision process, Crown Grant, license to the city for use as park, for park use or for zoning. Staff have prepared a handout that summarizes the various dedication methods, and that is available for distribution to council this evening. I believe the clerk has copies of that. It's been distributed, thank you. A bit of a summarizing sheet that just describes some of the different mechanisms involved. Certainly protection through the park dedication bylaw process is the recommended and preferred approach. It requires a 2/3 majority vote of council to approve under the provisions of the community charter. It is an intentional designation on the part of a city which clearly demonstrates a priority on protecting specific property for park purposes for future generations. The report before you today addresses the two issues that Council had asked staff to address. It outlines a framework for future park dedications, and it identifies 7 specific parks for dedication under bylaw. The recommended approach for future park dedication includes 4 main evaluation criteria, a 7-year cyclical review process, and mechanisms such that future bylaws would reflect the specific direction of council and any legislative changes at the time. The 7 parks that are being recommended for dedication use the criteria that is outlined in the report, and they include a portion of Oakdale Park, Mountain View Park, Daiquiri Park, Noons Creek Park, Normstaff Park, Burquitlam Community Garden, and Eagle Ridge Park. Jim Charlebois is here with me this evening, our Planning and Program Development Manager, and he's available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see one question, Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted that after about 2 years since my notice of motion that we've now come aboard with some park dedication. And, you know, but I noticed that a lot of parks are not in here. There's certain parks that are not even mentioned as far as dedication. Now, I don't know, we're going by size because Normstaff Park is not even an acre, is it?
No, I think it's about 2 acres.
No, but I know, but it is, you know.
How big is Normstaff Park?
Your Worship, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact area for Normstaff Park at the right now. The 7 parks that are identified in the bylaw do meet the criteria that's in the framework, as Ms. McKay has identified. So those would be parks that are currently owned by the city, that are at least 10 years old. That would allow for some use patterns to develop so that, and in any developing neighborhoods. The sites are all zoned for institutional use, so they all have a park zoning on them currently.
And those are precisely the problems I'm having, that somehow you've come up with an idea that it should be 10 years old. I don't know what age has got to do with a park. Once it's been created as a park, what's the difference whether it should be wait for 10 years or 5 years or 3 years to be dedicated? I think that the minute it's a park created as a park in our neighborhood and the people expect it, that it's a park, it could be dedicated immediately. You don't have to wait for no 10 years, you know. And another thing that, you know, Cottonwood Park, it's just as big as Normstaff Park. It's not on here.
Cottonwood Park.
Your Worship, through you to Council, with respect to Cottonwood Park, part of the criteria identifies that there are no future plans to redevelop or reassess the use of those parks, and so Cottonwood Park is on the Parks, Rec and Culture
well, it's going to
plan to review in the coming years, in the next couple of years.
Whether it's a park now, whether it's going to be redeveloped or whatever it is, it should be dedicated. I mean, it's a park, period. And it's been a park there for 30 years. that I know for sure, maybe 40, okay, maybe longer than that. But, you know, then we have a park right here next to the Coquitlam Town Center pool. That's a park in there, and it's, I think, about 7 acres or something. That should, I don't see it here for dedication, and I think that that should be. And I can name a lot of others that are not on this list. And I'm just wondering, why did we not list every park in here for the council members to see and make a discussion? Because I like to have a good discussion in here.
It's here.
On these parks, because I think it's very, very important that, you know, we have a park and then people are scared that somehow some future council members decide they're going to develop that park. And they're going to develop that park, and that's it. And the public wouldn't have a say. This way, if the park is dedicated, the only way they can get it undedicated is go to a referendum to the public. So these are the things that I'm saying. That the parks are parks and they should be dedicated. Now, whatever parks that I know we have about 7 to be dedicated here in the bylaw, but there's many, many others that should be dedicated too. And I'd like to have a list of them and see why they're not being dedicated. Maybe this, I don't think it's a 10-year bylaw, that somehow the criteria has to be 10 years or whatever it is. So I'd like us to, I'm going to support this for these 7 parks, but I think we need to go further and get the rest of the parks aboard to this council to decide what is it that they want to do with it. I mean, I don't think for 1 minute that we should be going for 1/4 acre park or half an acre. Maybe set a criteria that it should be an acre, acre and a half, 2 acres, or whatever it may be. But I'd like to have a discussion with these council members, because I myself cannot make that decision. But I do know that many, many people have phoned me, talked to me, and they said, we got a park, how come it's not dedicated? I know years ago when I was the mayor, we dedicated a whole bunch of parks for that same reason, because the public outcry.
These were parks.
So I think we should, again, proceed this, and I don't know whether we should do it every 3 years, or every 4 years, every 5 years, bring something like this back. So I'm looking forward to the discussion with the council members of, you know, as far as the rest of the parks are concerned. Thank you.
It's here.
I know, but
Yeah. No, the one you mentioned is a dedicated park. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 parts to the recommendation. The first one is approval of a dedication framework, and then the second is the dedication of 7 parks. As of today, Councillor Sikora has said that he's prepared to move forward on dedicating those 7 parks, and I'd be prepared to do that as well. But I'm not prepared to approve the park dedication framework without a good deal of discussion. My preference, and I don't believe that there's a motion on the floor at the moment, is to refer that framework to public consultation. I know from past experience the public has a great interest in protection of our parks. I spoke earlier with the deputy clerk. I understand we can't, it wouldn't be our usual practice to send it to public hearing, but there's no difficulty with our saying take this out to public consultation and bring us back the results. Let's find out what they think. Frankly, I have some difficulty with item 4 in the dedication framework, because we're thinking that we might want to change the way we use that particular park. Perhaps take out a swimming pool and put in a water play area or something like that. That, to me, has nothing to do with whether the park should be dedicated. It's part of a ravine or a natural area. So, I don't understand why that would preclude dedicating it as a park. Current civic facility or grounds. Lots of our parks have civic facilities within them. Doesn't make them any less parks. So I think we need a good deal of discussion about this dedication framework. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have 7 parks before us to dedicate. That's moving us in the right direction. If we were to separate this, I would recommend that I would move that recommendation 1 be referred to public consultation, and move recommendation 2, the dedication of the parks.
That would be great, but we already have a motion on the...
Don't think you do.
Don't yet have a motion on the floor.
I didn't recognize Councillor Sikora before I also recognized first and second, the mover and seconder. Oh, okay.
Receiving introductory comments prior to moving to the record.
There we go. Okay. Teach me. Okay, the motion is, well, take one motion at a time.
Separated?
Why don't you move to the second part, because we know we're going to get that passed. Why don't we move the recommendation 2?
Move recommendation 2, sir.
Recommendation 2, seconded by Councillor Sikora. On recommendation 2, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. On recommendation 1.
The motion is to refer it to public consultation.
Second.
Okay. The motion is to refer it to public consultation process. I don't know why we would do that, quite frankly. Okay, that wasn't the motion, but you seconded the motion for public consultation. Do you have any, Councillor Atkinson? What? Take your microphone.
I'm part of the consultation.
Okay. Well,
I could understand maybe Councillor.
one moment, please. On the new motion, Councillor Atkinson.
I could have some clarifications of staff in the process, but I don't know why we'd be going out to public consultation, because I don't think we're there with if you're concerned about what's here right now, I think we need staff to come back in this process. So I think internal discussion with staff would be more appropriate at this time moving forward. Going out to public consultation, I don't think we're at that stage or ready for that stage.
May I respond, Your Worship?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry.
My view that...
Sorry to do this to you.
That I can see... I have some issues with the dedication framework, but I expect, based on past history, that we're going to hear a lot more about how our dedication framework should be framed from the public than we have from staff, and that we can dream up by asking questions of staff. I think it's been, as Councillor Sikora pointed out, this has been in the works for a couple of years. The public's been expecting it to happen, and I think they're going to want to have their voice sooner rather than later, and that can inform staff in bringing us back something that we can deal with.
Well, I would probably, have it go back to committee, then come back and go out and for us to debate our issues with it first. That way.
I don't know what committee you'd go to, right?
Well, we got council and committee, which would come back as a report, brothering up to council.
That might very well be where the results of consultation come back to.
Okay. I'm a little bit troubled by this, because I know that as well, this is land owned by the city, and in some cases there are discussions, for example, that the city has had related to the potential for adjustment of a border of a park or swapping parkland for other land, and those kinds of discussions can't be done in a public consultation process. They can't be done in a public setting. They're land issues related to city land, and so while I'm not trying to stifle the public comment, I don't want to embark on a process where we're going to go down all the way down there, have expectations raised in the public, and then have the in-camera discussion about whether or not we can do this. Because any discussion that ought to be in closed doors, the debate about it isn't in public. The debate about it is behind closed doors. So we're sort of bound here by our own, by the Local Government Act, that land matters related to city-owned land first of all get debated behind closed doors if we're going to go there. So
Then, with respect, Your Worship, perhaps this entire discussion should be enclosed.
I didn't move the motion. Councillor Robinson.
Put it on the agenda.
I have questions about how did we get to sort of the 7-year cycle. What's magic about 7 years? Does it include all dedicated parks that are currently dedicated, or just these ones? So I think there's a lot of questions, and I would actually and I would be fine actually to involve the public at some point in some way to help guide us and make sure that we are on the right track around the process. It's not about making the decision around each and every individual park, but around, does this process make sense to people? So, for example, I, too, am not convinced that where there's current or future plans for design or redesign to upgrade a park's existing components, why wouldn't we dedicate it? I think Mackin Park's dedicated, and we're doing all kinds of stuff in that park. So, so I think it's the criteria that we want some consultation on, rather than which park and why that park, not another park. It's the criteria. And so, for that reason, I'm actually going to support the motion. I'm not sure if, in terms of ordering it, I'm not sure if I would prefer to see this at council and committee for more thorough discussion. And part of that might be to take it out for consultation, or if we just take it to consultation and then have it come back to council and committee. It might make more sense, I think, to take it for discussion to council and committee. Part of that discussion will be, where does the community get to have its say about the process or their criteria? Is there room? What could it look like? And then perhaps ready to make a decision on it.
Okay. I'm just going to take one moment of consultation about process, please. Council's deference, I'm going to refer this to an in-camera meeting of council so that we can discuss an element of it that needs to be discussed in camera. All fine? Okay. Okay.
Okay,
good.
thank you very much. I think, Mayor, that the best way to solve this one, as you said, that we trade parks and we do a lot of things with parks. I think that I'd like to amend the Councilman Nicholson's motion to go to a public hearing.
Lou, it's gone to...
Yeah, we referred it to an in-camera meeting. We're going to have a discussion about an in-camera element.
No, not another one, those.
Oh,
But we have them every week.
Oh, please. I'll tell you something. This will take another 2 years,
well, then we won't.
maybe longer.
Okay, but we can't debate whether something goes in camera in public. It's
Well,
not,
let's have a vote whether it should be in camera or not.
you can't debate whether something can go in camera. But I appreciate the sentiment. Okay. Madam Clerk. Your microphone. There we go.
The recommendation is that council receive for information the Metro Vancouver Board and brief.
So by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor
Is this the Greater Vancouver Regional District one that we're on now?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to have a...
Second by Councillor Robinson. Now go.
I'd like to have a discussion, not a discussion, but hear from the board members of what went on for the last 2 or 3 months at the Metro Vancouver.
Well, you were the representative up to
Sure.
last
No,
month.
no,
Well, for the first month of that, you were the representative.
Till November. What happened in December and January?
Well, the first meeting in December you were at, that was 6 weeks ago.
No, I was not at the
Thank you.
December meeting, sorry.
Okay,
So I'd like
you were
to know
supposed
what
to be at it,
happened in
sorry, you're right.
December and January,
Okay.
Just a brief.
A brief?
3/4
Okay.
of an hour discussion.
Okay. A lot of the same stuff happened.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, that's good enough.
The motion is approval of minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Not approval of the minutes, rather receipt of the report. Madam Clerk.
That concludes the items on the formal agenda.
Anybody?
Move adjournment.
There you go. Councillor Reid. Second. Councillor Asmundson. All in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Carried unanimously.